Swear, I moved everything around on my desk so I could stream some more of this guy. Alright, well, it looks like all my paints are soupy, so I'm going to mix fresh. So this is where I left this guy yesterday. I worked on him a little bit after the stream, just blocking in the brown. I'm feeling pretty good about it. Let me back up a little bit so you can actually see the whole model here. So yeah, I like the brown. I think it looks really good. And then you can kind of see how the teal on this side is going to go more purpley. And then this side is going to be much warmer. But I got a lot of that left to put in here. So now I'm trying to figure out what I want to paint today, because I've got a lot to do on this guy, and then I've got my Kingdom Death Lady, who is very close to being done, but it's just super fiddly stuff. See if I can get her in focus. She's very tiny, especially compared to this gigantic dude. So I worked on her a little bit yesterday. It's just really slow going. I think I've got a little bit more to do with the OSL. The bottom of this lantern's a little bit of a question mark. The yellow will probably reflect off of her skin back onto the chains a little bit, but I don't think the light will hit it directly, although I've got this bit here, so just got some figuring out to do. Her feet I might make a little darker. I want to do a little bit of OSL here because of the lantern, which then I've got to do the light shining from here. So it's just a lot of little things. And I'm still, like, her gauntlets and her armbands, I've just left because they're so freaking tiny. And there's, if you look at the art, there's fur around the edges and it's super small on the sculpt. So it's going to be a pain. Which I've started it. It's just a lot of really teeny tiny stuff. But yeah, I think the big thing is just figuring out the OSL from this, because that's really going to make the whole thing look finished. Right now, she's kind of tied into the base. Like, I use a lot of the same browns that I used on her on the base, but the lighting is not cohesive yet. And I'm trying to figure out if I want to put, like, little scrubby brushes or something, or just toss a skull on the base. This is just kind of a placeholder until I figured out what the whole thing was going to look like. And I'm not doing, like, I probably could do much more dramatic lighting, like make this leg a lot darker. Well, or really this whole half. But it's not a style I really like. I like being able to see the model. This leg is still quite a bit darker, and like underneath is. And I had to, when I did the OSL, I lightened this up a lot, and then I came back and darkened up this skin quite a bit to really sell it. What else? Oh, that was the other thing. Her face, probably can't tell here, and it's still really subtle in person. I think it'll show up when I do final pictures of her, but I put quite a bit of yellow into her face, actually, because the light hitting her face would be yellow, and then I didn't on this half. I didn't make it as dark as I could have. I just wanted that quality of light and to get the color more than any brightness, because she's really far enough away from this, and I'm not doing the lighting super strong, so just get some of the flavor of that lantern. This, on the other hand, is like super close to her skin, so I did change the values there a little bit. But yeah, it's like, I don't know if it'll make good streaming, because it's just, I'm down to very, very tiny changes on that. this guy, got plenty to do on him. So, and with the brown, I highlighted it with a slightly more orange mix here because I'm doing the same thing. It's, even with the brown, it's warmer here and then it's cooler on this backside here. And I'm just trying to keep that throughout. This is darker. I mixed that too dark. I'm going to need to lighten that back up. It's a lot of just figuring out how far I want to go. Which I do need to sit down and do a model that has more severe lighting, but not today. So I'm going to put some more of my phthalo blue green shade down, and then some of my green, even though I already have a bunch on my palette, but I forgot to open it like an hour before I started streaming, so it's a little soupy. It's the only downside to a wet palette. It's like even if you drain all the water out, the paints just kind of continue to soak up water. Alright, mixing more of my teal, which let's see if I can scoot that on over. Which I swear my palette is not moldy. I spilled yellow ink. And yeah, my sponge is kind of a mess. It's still working, so I haven't replaced it yet. I do have a replacement, but I'm going to get my money's worth out of this one. But yeah, I spilled that, and I spilled some of that AK Interactive varnish like everywhere. Which I figured that would kill the sponge, but it did not. So, on it limps. But yeah, I forget sometimes, because when I'm done painting, like I'll fill up the palette with a bunch of water and just flood the thing while I'm working, and then when I'm done, I'll just drain it off into a cup, which is fine unless I've got like inks or anything that's super runny, and then it just makes a mess. The combination of being accident prone and absent-minded, I think. Which the last Kingdom Death model I worked on, I broke, I'm trying to think how many times. Made me so mad. I broke her like 3 or 4 times. Part of it was because it's resin and it was just very fragile pieces to begin with, and part of it was just because I swung my arm across my desk for whatever reason and just obliterated the model. And I did that with the last GW model. I had a rough week there where I was just breaking models left and right. Just part of the reason I cleaned my desk, to try and limit the damage. Because sometimes I'll get stuck on projects and then just set them aside, which is fine until I've done that with a lot of models. And then I just have a pile of models on my desk. And all my paint gets pulled out of the racks and just lives on the desk. So yeah, this isn't, I'm not shooting for the exact teal color. It's easier just to get something down and then like, because you can see here, like this is completely different. But I'm going to work the yellow into it and that's going to change it, and then working the purple under the shades. So this is just kind of where I start from. I did mix it a little dark here on this foot. But yeah, especially when I'm just getting base layers down, I don't worry. That's a little too late. But yeah, I don't worry about getting like super exact. It just needs to be somewhere in the neighborhood of close. But yeah, especially like once I start doing the highlights and the shadows, I wet blend anyway. So I just kind of slap everything on there and smush it around. But this gives me a place to start. There we go. This is a little bit closer to the final color. Okay, so I was doing, I did that purple. This is going to be a little bit lighter, even though I want the back side to be darker. Like I'm envisioning the light coming from this way. But because this is facing up a little bit, just positionally, it's going to get more light. So I'm going to lighten that up too. The back side needs more purple. It got a little desaturated. So I'm going to lighten that up and then immediately slap purple on top of it. Which again, I think this will be lighter. Nah, I'll go ahead and have that be roughly the same amount. It's like also the feet are just going to be darker because they're lower to the ground. And I usually do the light up above the model a little bit. Or at least like chest level. Alright, the purple, I don't care if it's a little soupy. I'm going to start here, dragging in. You can kind of see there. That's where it's going to be the darkest. So I drag it from the darkest to the lightest area. Or actually, I should be doing it the other way around, huh? Whoops. Getting better at painting in the right direction, but it's a lot to remember sometimes. Alright, so, and then this little flat bit here is going to catch the light, but this rim here is straight up and down, so that's going to be darker. Purple's pretty saturated, so I'm just grabbing a very small amount and then wiping off the extra once I've got some on the model. Which is not the tidiest way to work, but that's kind of, it's easier for me just to throw paint on, and then if it's too much, pull it back off. I know some people prefer to work the other way and gently build stuff up, but I'd rather be a little bit more aggressive with it. Okay, so that's looking a little bit similar. And then since this is dry, let me pull some yellow. So I've got my cold yellow. And that is why I unscrew the camera first. I don't know if it's just me that has problems with these bottles or what. I haven't found any paint container I've particularly enjoyed though. I have issues with pretty much all of them. Which I know some people like the dropper bottles, but I have issues with those too. Alright. So now that I've got my yellow, which it's all the way up there. Okay, yeah, it's too far to really... Well, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully I won't forget and end up bathing my model in my palette. Alright, I'm going to do this little foot here. So I know the edge is going to catch the light, so I'm going to go ahead and let that be my brightest bits of yellow. And this is the cool thing, and part of the reason why I love the Chimera paints so much. They cover really well. Like, I'm just barely using any yellow. And I'm using it on, you know, medium dark color. And it's showing up really nicely. Is it completely opaque? No, but it's much more opaque than other brands tend to be. And it's just nice because that way I don't have to keep coming back and doing layer after layer after layer. Alright, so I've kind of sketched in. For me, mentally, it helps to sketch in the brightest areas, just kind of to remind myself where the light is going to catch. So it's all those edges. And then I'm going to take a very small amount of yellow and just kind of gently work it in here. I'm working from the center out to the edges because the edges are where it's going to be brightest, which that's a little heavy. Alright, so I've got that set up. I'm going to grab a little bit of the teal and just kind of feather those edges. Now I'll probably come back later, like more towards the end when I'm finishing the model, and like glaze this to just really smooth it. But just a little bit of wet blending gets you really, really far. Oh, got that where that did not need to be, which is fine. That's still pretty rough. All right, and then I'm going to do the same thing, work from the darkest, you know, as far out as I want the yellow. And then just bring it towards the highlighted area. That got a little bit wet. But yeah, it'll make this greener. Whoops. Okay, so that's not going to be yellow. That actually, yeah, right up against that edge is going to be a little bit darker because that edge is actually going to block the light a little bit. A little bit of fuzz. Okay. Yeah, part of this is adding highlights, and part of this is just mixing together the teal because I want yellow in this mix anyway. Just tidying up that corner. And then grabbing a little bit more of the teal. Yeah, I'll have to come back and do another layer here. But see how the teal mixes? It mixes with the yellow on the model and gives me some of those highlights. I'm actually going to grab a little bit more yellow here. There we go. Needed to be brighter. But yeah, with this color, I like not having it being 100% smooth. I think it gives it some interest, especially since these are big plates. So by mixing the colors on the model and letting it just kind of randomize itself a little bit instead of mixing it super smooth on the palette, I think it makes it look really cool. Especially since if you consider, like if you look at tanks or airplanes or whatever, they don't wear evenly. Like the color gets faded differently depending on how the sun hits it, because the sun just fades the crap out of everything. Damage, repairs, all of that. So I like that little bit of unevenness in color. I think it's more realistic. All right, I'm going to work a little bit of purple in there. And then this is also going to have a little bit of purple. And this is a little heavy. So I'm just going to quickly rinse off my brush and then just kind of gently blend that in there. There we go. Because this sticks out a little bit, so you're going to get a little bit of a shadow there. Alright, that dried pretty quickly because I'm using thin layers, which is fine. I'm just gonna blend out that harsh edge on the purple, but I want that purple against the yellow. That makes that highlight look really nice. And then I'm gonna do a little bit of shading here because again, this top piece is gonna block some of the light. This is not my fine detail brush. This is just a, what is it? It's a size 1 Da Vinci. And it's still in pretty good shape. The tip is just not detail level anymore for me. But it's still pretty sharp, which is why I'm using it at this stage of painting. All right, I'm just going to catch this edge here again. Brighten that up. All right, now I have to decide where the light is going to catch it, which I can change later, but... All right, so yeah, you can see here how that just kind of skips over the edge a bit. And the same thing here, although not as dramatically, like this outside edge here is going to catch the light a little bit. And it just emphasizes the overall shape of these plates. Like there's curves and stuff. And if you don't paint it that way, like if I didn't have that purple and I just had it highlighted on both edges like that, it would flatten it out. And that to me is like the real trick of miniature painting once you get into lighting and stuff. Even if you're not interested in doing like really dramatic display stuff, it's still really important because that's, you know, you're painting a three-dimensional thing and it's really easy to just flatten it out with the way you're painting it. It's not going to necessarily look three-dimensional just because it is three-dimensional. All right, so that's a little bit more dramatic. This ended up having more contrast because I started with a darker teal. And it's not, you know, they're still in the same family, but it's definitely two different looks. I think I like this better though. This ended up getting blended out a little too much. This you can definitely see like the separate colors. Like you can pick out, you know, here's the yellow at the very edge, here's the green, here's the blue, and then even the purples. Here, it's much more flat. It's just green and blue with a little bit of yellow. So, I'm going to make that match. And that's kind of, I guess, one of the downsides to painting the super saturated stuff this way and not using pre-blended paints. You have to be much more aware of how things look when you're painting them. Like, I'm gonna move my palette here. You know, it requires a lot more mental energy, I guess, to make sure that things are matching. But at the same time, I just really like the effects I'm able to get. And just the depth of color. And that for me, like, I love doing super saturated stuff. And painting wise, it's just a lot of fun. I like throwing paint down and smushing it around. It's not a terribly precise way, but it's fun. Alright, yeah, I'm gonna have to hit that outside edge with the purple. Not the purple. The purple's what made it dark. That with the green. But yeah, that's really, like, with this super saturated stuff, it's just not defaulting to white and black for making things darker and lighter. Which, not that I don't ever use it, it's just when I do use white and black, it's a very deliberate choice. And that's usually if I'm trying to lighten or darken a mix, I'll use yellow or purple or blue. Yeah, I managed to make this whole thing darker and then work my way back up, which is fine. And this is part of the reason I love, another reason, which I don't want this to turn into like a Chimera commercial, but with a lot of paints, you really have to like just let stuff dry. And with this, I can go pretty heavy-handed with the paint without it starting to pull off the model, which is nice if I'm just wanting to play around with colors. And that's what allows me to do more blending on the model. The paint is just very forgiving, but it also still, like, once you stop messing with it, it dries really fast, which is nice. I was using Pro Acryl for a while, and I do love Pro Acryl, but for whatever reason, like, it's super matte, it's super opaque, which I really liked, but the dry time was just really long, like even with thin layers. And I couldn't paint like this with it at all. Like, you'd put down a layer and you'd have to just let it dry or it would just start pulling off the model, which is really frustrating. Because I wanted to switch to using Pro Acryl on everything, but I could only really use it for base coating, or if I was just like batch painting and taking a long time, giving stuff time to dry. All right, that went a bit too dark, which is fine. I just wanted to work that purple. And all right, I'm gonna stop messing with that for a minute and then come back and get the yellow. And then that should be closer to this foot. All right, in the meantime, this has dried. And I think I'm going to lighten it up first and then do the yellow. It's so weird mixing this because it's just the yellow is such a big part of this color, but I really like mixing it separate, so it looks a little funky on the palette, like just trying to get it close. It's one of my favorite color combinations, though. I love doing teal with just the yellow and the purple. I did that. The first model I did that with was a gigantic War Machine model, and that was like the first one I really did non-metallic metal on, and it was a really cool piece. And that's part of the reason I did the colors this way. On smaller stuff, it's not as noticeable, but on big models, when you do like the color transitions like this, it's just you have enough space to do that, and it's really rad. All right, so I'm hitting this first because that's going to be the more highlighted area. It's not covering like super, it'll dry better. The inside of this, I'm going to go ahead and hit a little bit, but I definitely, I'm going to lighten it up so I can darken it again because I want it to read more purple. It's just dark blue right now. But yeah, this color combo, and then I like doing pink and orange and purple together a lot too. In kind of the same way. Shading hot pink with purple and then doing highlights in orange. Oop. Do I want to do yellow? I decide if I should tone that a bit different. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that, and then add a few different shades of blue here. Some of that's because I'm not being super particular when I'm mixing, and some of that's just figuring out tonally where I want things to be. Hi! I hope you are doing well. So yeah, let's see if that's dry. Yeah, that dried already, which is why I love this paint. Because I am impatient. And with other brands, it can take quite a bit longer to dry. And then I mess up the paint because I don't want to wait. You can use a hairdryer, but I don't like using a hairdryer with acrylic. Like the top layer always dries, but if it's just a hair too thick, then it's still like really goopy underneath. And then you spent all that time with a hairdryer and it's still not doing what you want to do. Alright, let's throw some yellow on that big old foot pedal there. Alright, so that's going to be yellow. This inside here I'm going to have to darken back up. Alright, so yeah. Just figuring out the angle of the light here, which I usually end up, I'll get done and then something will just be glaringly bad. But I'm just trying to get it close at this point. This back, I haven't decided how dark I want the back, so I'm going to leave that for now. This is the paint or the light I kind of try and figure out as I go, but this is still very much like blocking everything in. So this is just kind of getting it close, and then once I get most of everything covered, then I start doing passes to just kind of unify everything. And I know some people will paint, and it looks really nice when they post their in progress stuff, because they'll do the black primer and then they'll do one section at a time and finish that section before they move on to another section. And it looks really impressive. My brain doesn't work that way. For me, it's easier to kind of just rough everything in and then go over it and over it and over it. Which I'm sure the people that work that way still have to go back and tweak. But for me, I like seeing how everything goes. And it also ties into not being able to visualize as well as I'd like. Some people are able to plan how they're going to paint, which is awesome if you can. I start out with more a general idea of what colors I want to use, but beyond that I just kind of figure it out as I go. Or sometimes I don't know what colors, like I'll just have one color that I really want to highlight and then I'll work backwards from there. And that's just kind of, it was frustrating a long time with art because I do that with traditional art too. I know some people are really good at planning and like I'll do thumbnails and stuff, but as far as like truly being able to like visualize something, I can't. And I don't think that's completely necessary. Like, you still need to have a system. It's just my system happens to be throwing all the paint down and then figuring it out. But it's funny just because a friend had mentioned that they weren't good at visualizing stuff either, and I thought for a long time it was just me being really terrible at art. There's so many pieces to this guy. It's like I have a reference pulled up, but if you look on the GW site, like, it's so small because it's zoomed out so far. Which I'd rather have a reference than no reference, but yeah, if time wasn't a factor, I probably would do sub-assemblies, but this guy's gigantic, and I could probably spend a month painting him. I don't want to spend a month on this model, so... That's why he all got slapped together, which it kind of sucks trying to get the inner edges here, but honestly, like, unless you're holding this model up to your face, you're not gonna see, you know, if I painted all the way down in here. And I'm very much, like, I'm still gonna try and get a good finish on him, but he's going to be played with. So I want to try and spend most of my time and energy painting something that's gonna look good from a couple feet away. And it just doesn't make sense to stress about teeny tiny details that you're not even going to be able to see on the table. It'll bother me because I know it's not painted like all the way inside, but that is a personal problem. Okay, I gotta see what the inside of the back end of this is supposed to be. I think it's supposed to be the main color. I think I may just leave that black though, because it seems a bit silly. It's kind of broken into chunks already. Like this inner, I'm trying to see if you can see it on the camera, this inner casing here that's rectangular, that's got all this stuff. Yeah, they have that, the main color on the box model, but since that's really like underneath everything, I think leaving it black is fine. And having that black is not gonna take away from anything. And if anything, it just visually, you don't have that color coming from underneath to distract you. Because this is really where you want to be looking. Even though I'm spending all the time on the legs, like, the center of the model is really going to be the focal point. Especially since he's going to be standing like that on the table. So. Alright, I'm going to sketch in some of my yellow. And what I'm doing here, you can, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can take your brush and draw it from, you know, as far out as you want the yellow into this corner, because that's going to be the brightest. Because this is a larger area, I like stippling. It keeps you from having the brush marks and rough transition points. And it gives you a little bit of texture. And you can, some people will do this and then glaze it all out to the point where it's super smooth. It's not really to my taste. I like having a little bit of variation. So I do that. I'm just going to come over with the teal and just kind of Smush that a little bit. And the yellow's still a little bit wet, so just kind of blending that out a little bit. And then I'm going to let that dry and then see if I want more yellow, which I'm probably going to want more yellow, especially since this is higher up on the model. And then you can see there how it's still pretty blue in this shaded area here. But I want my shadows to be... Oh, that is black. I'm glad I... Okay. Glad I noticed before I put that on the model. Okay, there's my purple. They look way too close on the palette here. So I'm going to grab a teeny tiny bit of purple. Doing a pretty thin layer. Not quite a wash because I want a little bit more control. And I'm going to just kind of gently feather that. I'm actually going to bring that out a little bit more. And then I'm going to come back with the teal and just wet blend that transition. So normally, because I don't have enough cameras to show everything, I don't know if anyone else paints this way, but it's just a technique that works for me. I just get enough paint to work on, and then I go and wipe my brush off, and then come back with a damp but not wet brush, and then just kind of smush stuff around. Yeah, I'm gonna have to tweak that, but that's going in the right direction. So yeah, just to show I know what's going on. So that's, I know some people like will test stuff on their hands and all that, but for me, because I throw the paint on the model first and then I pull it off, I just kind of dump my extra paint on the paper towel. I go through a lot of paper towels. And I also use the paper towel to repoint my brush because I am not a brush-licking monster. Alright, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow, which I'm not going to come out as far into the leg this time. I'm just trying to brighten up the edges here. I'm also trying to figure out the angle, because the plate is one angle, but then the light's not necessarily going to be at the same angle. I think I'm just going to leave it, the light going with the direction of the plate for now. That's a bit too much teal, which is fine. I'm just going to throw some yellow in there. But yeah, it kind of mixes together to give you a pretty bright green. And then if I want it to read more yellow, just come back and just dump yellow on it. Alright, and then I did mix the yellow into some of my teal on my palette, just to kind of bring out that transition point. And then I'm going to take my teal and feather that out. And that's pretty good for now. For that, it's pretty dramatic. I'll probably bring the teal out into this purple a little bit more, which it may be dry enough to do. But yeah, this is very much what I would consider to still kind of be roughing it out. Okay, yeah, so I brought that in. You can see quite a bit. And then I can glaze that later to smooth it out. It's still purple, like way back in there, but I didn't want it to be quite so harsh in the transition here. Like this one's got a pretty quick transition there between the purple and the teal. But I like that being a little bit more dramatic on the back side of the model. This I want it to be a little bit softer. All right. And then this knee pad, you can kind of see how I sketched that out. And like I'm leaving that until I get more done. But that gives me, you know, a rough idea. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Which this curves under a lot more. So it's going to be purple for like almost half of it. And I'm going to leave that dark. When I start getting more finished, it's probably going to have bounce lights. So I'll probably do, you know, faint highlights underneath. And that's also a bit much for tabletop, honestly, doing bounce highlights. That's very much just if I have time and I'm being ridiculous about lighting. But I don't think they're critical. Also, realistically, no one's going to see that unless they pick the model up and look underneath. But I can't help myself sometimes, so. Alright. And that was a little dark. I'm lightening it up. You can kind of see here, like I've got the purple here. But this, it's purple because it's curving away. This is still a flat edge that's poking out a little bit. So that's going to be brighter. I'm also going to take my yellow and just kind of run it along the top here. And this, like, is kind of where it veers into artistic license a little bit because this top edge would not necessarily be lit up like this. But visually, especially from a couple feet away, it makes that edge stand out really nice. Because otherwise, if I had that, you know, shaded more realistically, it would just kind of not stand out. And I go for more of like a stylized than realistic anyway. Which I can probably do the same thing with the yellow here. I just kind of left that unfinished. I still got to figure out what color I want the top of this piece to be. Which, yellow, probably, because that's going to catch the light. And then purple or dark teal, depending on how much contrast I want to do. Which is kind of a question mark. Alright, so I like this. This is a bit dark for me. So I'm going to mix some slightly lighter teal and just kind of work that in and see how I feel about it. Which again, trying to not get too bogged down on the color at this stage, but how light the legs are is going to kind of determine how light the top is. So I want to get close to what I'm after here. Okay. Now I did lighten this up with white, which desaturates it a little bit. And what I can do to lighten it back, or to saturate it again, is I'll do very thin layers of the green or the blue, which shouldn't make it too much darker, but it'll get color back in. So I'll just stippling the fairly small brush tip. Just makes it a lot easier to blend out. Especially on these plates, like if there's any brush marks, they will show up. So it's easier just to have everything be a brush mark. All right, grabbing a very little with my green. There we go. And it's still lighter. It's gonna have to dry to see what it really looks like, but there we go. Yeah, I'm just kind of working my lighter teal because as I'm working on this, I'm like, this is too dark, so. And then I'll throw the yellow back on top once it dries. But yeah, any other paint, I would probably be pulling it off the model by now. This is ridiculously forgiving for overworking it. All right, I'm just gently kind of knocking down the yellow a little bit and blending it out. There we go. But yeah, this is the teal I'm really after. Which I'll have to rework the feet and stuff again, but that's fine. Which I may still leave the feet high contrast. I don't know. Alright. I'm going to work on the upper sections a little bit here. This is such an awkward model to paint. This is also my super high-tech solution. I have the base partly worked out. So that's the base he's going to sit on, which I lost a piece of bark off of it. I had some serious issues getting this put together, but it's fine for now. Which I've got the big old base holder. Where is it? Yeah. So I've got like the official GW base holder or whatever, which I think this might just barely fit on because this thing is freaking huge. It makes it very unwieldy to hold though. Like I normally like the base holders. Yeah, just trying to like muscle this thing in here is horrible. And then you've got this big gigantic thing on this little handle. Which, yeah, with me being a klutz is not a great combination. This gives me a lot more to hold on to. It's cheap because it's a bunch of wine corks and some rubber bands. And this is going to be pinned onto the base anyway. So I just went ahead and stuck pins in there. Also, so there's this little dot right here. I smoothed it out. And I probably could go back and smooth it better, but it's probably going to be covered in basing material. But yeah, I totally drilled through the top of the foot. Yeah, I had a week with models. As I actually had this guy sitting for a bit after I put him together because it was very frustrating between the difficulties I had with him and getting the base assembled. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead. I don't always do 2 layers of paint because I dump so much paint on here anyway. I know some people are very anal about having like solid base underneath, and it depends on what I'm doing, but like this, a lot of it's just this teal color I've done it enough times and I know how it's going to build up. I really just need something to kind of cover the black primer, and then I just build and build and build on that. So not what I would normally recommend. In this case, I'm just doing a second layer because I'm waiting for some other stuff to dry. And like that, just tonally, I'm going to work this blue back. But yeah, especially with like first layers on black primer with bright colors, like as long as it's in the neighborhood of what you're looking for, it really doesn't matter. Because you're going to have to, nothing is going to cover it in one coat. For me, especially since I'm having to mix colors, like I'm not going to waste time or energy getting the perfect match and then it's going to get covered up. And sometimes I have been, this is what happens when I clean my desk, I lose models. Yeah. So with like the penguins I've been working on, I've just been, because it takes a while to build up from the black, and like especially on the white bits, I'll just throw some, you know, thin layer of white, some stuff, especially since I have white ink now, I'll just do like a dry brush of white ink a few times just to get started if I know I'm going to have issues with the primer being so dark. Which normally, for bright colors, I'll prime white. It does save me some steps. This I did black because, and even then I did black because I wasn't doing sub-assemblies, so I need it to be dark where I can't reach with my brush. And then also, I knew it was going to have a lot of metallics on it, and metallics look better on a base of black. Otherwise, I probably would have like done the top part white. This model's just kind of a pain, which I knew going in, so. This is actually, my husband got 2 of these, and he assembled and primed the other one. And I'm not sure if he offered to let me paint this because he knew I'd enjoy painting a complex model, or if because the first one just was demoralizing. It's also one of the worst models to assemble I've had to deal with in a while. Normally, GW models aren't that bad, but like a bunch of parts were labeled wrong on the instructions, and just the order in which you put things together is a little funky, and yeah. And some pieces are like so small on the sprue they got bent before I cut them off. This is very aggravating. Alright, so you can kind of see here, like this is very blue. Intentionally blue because I'm going to mix the yellow on it and then it's going to get to this green color. And this is just sort of a practice mixing thing. I know roughly where I need to get it to get to this with the yellow mixed in. And here, I'm trying to not do what I did with the feet and everything. I had it the right blue, but it was too dark. So this is light enough. I should be able to get it to this without having to mix quite so much, but we'll see. Yeah, I think the original reason I did this blue on the first model I did it on is as a privateer press model, and I was using their teal paint, which is a really nice teal, but it doesn't cover for anything. So like mixing it with the other colors was just me trying to get it to work. And then I ended up liking that better than the flat paint. All right. It's like, do I want to do yellow or do I want to go ahead? I might pre-mix. See how I feel about that. Yeah, that's fine. This I'm not stippling. It's a fairly small piece, and I can do some directional brushwork just by pulling it long ways. So hard explaining lighting sometimes. The light's gonna look banded anyway. Just, it's very common with like just this shape. So I'm just gonna lean into that with my brushwork instead of stippling. Which I guess you could argue that it's not gonna look as unified in texture with like this plate. But they're not super close together on the model. And they're also just functionally different pieces. Like this is a leg plate and like this is a casing on an exhaust pipe or whatever. So they're probably not going to be manufactured the same, which goes a little deep. But for me, it helps understanding materials when it comes to figuring out what to paint them. I got water into that. Yeah, I was actually talking to someone about that on a miniature painting Discord the other day because he was like, we're using leather as an example. And it's like if you just pick like a flat brown to paint leather, like there is no universal brown that's just leather, and it's not going to look like leather because it's flat. And if you look at leather, like there's so many different treatments you can do that change the color. There's so many textures depending on, you know, what animal it comes from and, you know, how it's been prepared. So when you sit down to, you know, paint leather, you have to think about, you know, what the texture is. And then there's the color, but there's also your environment. Which my favorite leather recipe tends to be heavy on the purple and orange just because it's super saturated. Not terribly realistic necessarily, but it's fun. Alright, so I've got, you can kind of see how the green really just emphasizes that curve. Now I'm going to take the yellow and come back and hit the outside edges. Helps if I get it on the camera, huh? There we go. And it's pretty thin. And that's not the brush, that's just because it's a very sharp edge end. Using the edge of the brush, it does all the heavy lifting for me, because trying to do really small lines is terrible. Alright. I'm going to continue. No, I smudged that. Throw it all in the garbage. Alright. Let me correct that real quick. This, I'm trying to figure out if I want to work any of the purple into it. To build the color correctly, probably. But lighting-wise, this is going to be pretty bright up here, because we're at the top of the model. Which I can go ahead and work some purple, and worst thing that'll happen is I'll have to cover it back up. Yeah, it is definitely very dark, but I'm going to come back with the teal and just kind of blend that in. I'll have to come back with my green too, but that's fine. There we go. Yeah, the edge is a little bit dark for being on the top of the model. Which again, this is kind of just more artistic interpretation than anything. Or maybe it's a candy-coated mech, I don't know, but it's not quite dry, but that's roughly what it looks like. And it really, like, all mixed together, it doesn't read as purple. And that's kind of what I like about doing this kind of paint on like a tabletop model. Like if you look at it up close, you can definitely pick out the colors, but on the table it all kind of blends together. Yeah, I don't know if I want... Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do those edges yellow. Which again, I don't know if the light would necessarily catch it like that, but just for edge definition purposes, from far away it looks good. And this is part of why I wanted to keep this part underneath black. It just makes this stand out. Okay. Trying to use the edge of the brush. Not working quite so well on this little teeny tiny bit, which is fine. Some of my green mix on these rivets here, and then probably come back when that dries and hit it with smaller amount of yellow. Alright, so with the pure yellow, now that we've kind of got this sketched out, I'm going to try and get a very small amount on my brush and stipple it on. I'll probably still have to glaze it a little bit to blend it, but I just want some pure yellow, which I guess I could do stripier. Yeah, that actually works. So I've got like this hard line of yellow, and then it just blends out, which I may just leave that. And if it ends up being too harsh, I can glaze on top of it, but that's fine. And I like that better. Let me see if I can adjust my camera a little bit. This model's so freaking tall. So yeah, you can see how it's just like this pin line of yellow. And if you were painting not super saturated colors, it would probably be closer to white. But because everything else around it, you know, I've got a decent amount of contrast, especially with that purple back here. Visually, you know, it still looks shiny, even without it being white. So that's kind of the trick with the super saturated stuff too, is just keeping an eye on your contrast and your values. Now here, I'm also going to do even though the light's coming at it from this side here, I'm going to do work a little bit of the purple in. Just a band of it here. And this is like kind of similar to how I do non-metallic metal. Because you just kind of got light bouncing around. And like it's going to look darker here because the light is going to hit it hardest on this most raised part, and then it's going to immediately drop off and then pick back up on the edge, and it just kind of emphasizes that shape. Not quite that dark, maybe. But yeah, I think probably gonna have the light come at it like this, so actually this whole edge could be a little bit darker. And again, that just emphasizes the highlight and the overall shape of it, and it just makes it seem more round. There we go. Which it looks a little weird by itself right now, but again, like once I get more of the model painted, it'll hopefully all work together. Alright, and then this, even though this robe is the same color, it's going to be a completely different texture. I'm probably going to stipple the whole thing. To start with, though, let me see if I got a... It's like I cleaned up my desk, and now I'm just going to pull everything back out of where I put it. Because being organized is overrated, so why it's taking me forever to find a brush. Yeah. My poor brush cup. I guess, yeah, I have this. Too many brushes. Alright, I know I have a size 2 in here somewhere. Did I pull it out already? No. There it is. Okay, I did. Alright, I'm going to do a quick wash of the purple. Mostly just loading the brush full of water. Well, now that I think about it, it's probably a glaze, huh? So, anyway. Getting a brush full of water, and then just getting a tiny dot of the purple, and then blotting most of the water out on my paper towel, and picking up some crud along the way, because what is my life? Okay. I'm gonna try that again. It's like, basically, I want kind of a wash, but I also don't want to just slop purple all over this, so... Just trying to get a head start on the recessed areas a little bit. And I don't want to just flood it. I'll go ahead and do this sleeve too. And it's, you know, if it still collects and pools a little bit at the bottom edge of things and in the recessed areas, that's fine. I just don't want it sopping wet. There we go. Which I know, like, people talk about paint consistency all the time, and everyone's got, you know, it should be like milk or whatever. For me, that's never really been a helpful metric. For me, it's just get it to the consistency it needs to be to do what you need it to do. And if it's not, you know, keep adding water or remove water. Which even just, you know, cleaning your brush and going with a relatively dry brush, you can kind of wick stuff off of it if you need to. And that's, yeah, for this, not quite a wash. Not quite a glaze. It's mostly just, you know, do what you need to do to have control, but still have it gather in the recessed areas. Which again, like, this is very much a base layer and it's going to be worked over. I'm just trying to save myself some work later. And the reason I'm using a bigger brush is because I need all that water. So you can kind of see how this is already just gently shaded that, and it's a similar color to that. And that's just kind of my general shade color. And then I'm going to come back and highlight. So I've got a little bit of yellow already mixed in. So you can kind of see where it's making this really bright green there. I'm gonna focus on that for a minute. There we go. It actually looks a little bit lighter on the camera. Alright. One of these ways to zoom in back out. There we go. Oh, I grabbed too much paint. Okay. So I'm going to grab just a very teeny tiny amount of paint. Probably still going to be too much, but whatever. I'm just going to start stippling along the outside top edges, which I could do with yellow, but I think I'm going to do like I did with this and build it up a little bit with the yellow already mixed in, and then do the chunky yellow. Now this is probably the slowest technique that I use. Most stuff I just kind of go for what's faster, but there's no real shortcut for adding texture to cloth, and you kind of want to, you definitely want to build it up. Which you can still like blend it out and stuff if you do go a little strong, but you're just creating a lot more work for yourself if you go too aggressive at this point. Alright, I'm also going to turn this so I'm facing how the light's going to hit it. Which I've got this little awkward bit here, like the light's going to hit it, but then the cloth is folding back around, and then I've also got this kind of shading over it, so there's going to be some kind of funky stuff happening with the lighting there. So that's going to get left alone for now. And then here, even though like normally I would have that shaded, the light's hitting it this way, so yeah, this is just kind of a gigantic pain. It's like I want to preserve some of the folds in the cloth, but it's going to be flatter looking than it normally would be because this is where the light's really going to hit the model. And it doesn't make sense to have like super dark folds. So yeah, this is kind of an underpainting as well, even though it's highlights. This is where a lot of the texture in the robe is going to come from. Which I know it looks a little weird, but once you blend it in, it looks like cloth. I picked this pattern just because I don't think it's like a really strong weave or anything, but it breaks it up enough to keep it from looking super smooth. Alright, I'm gonna let that dry more than I normally would because I actually want to keep that texture. Normally I'd go ahead and start painting right on top of it and mix it a little bit more, but I want that texture. And I can go ahead and do this sleeve while I wait. And it's going to be the same thing, although there's a pretty sharp fold here, and I'm going to let that be dark. But there's this top edge here, which is definitely going to be lighter, where the light's going to catch. And then the side's going to be a little bit darker, but this edge here is going to catch the light. Which the middle's already pretty dark here, but I'm probably going to hit that with the purple once I start covering this up. So yeah, that's a little silly looking. Yeah, and then there's going to be even more stuff going on with the lighting since this is already the darker side of the model and that's like underneath the arm with the lance. So I may keep working on this side and get this pretty close to done and then come back and figure out what is even happening back there. In the meantime, alright. Just trying to figure out how I want the light to hit this. So there's a couple different ways I could do this. Like I could do like a really sharp band and then have the shadows, but I think I want this pretty soft. So I'm just stippling some yellow on and then just with a damp brush blending it out. Picked up a little teal. Just really want this edge here to be yellow. Yeah. Trying to decide if I want it to match this or not. Which, worst thing that happens is I have to fix it later. So I'm going to do like a bandy yellow right here where the plate starts to bend. Yeah, this I'm stippling, but I'm also wet blending and feathering. Inside part here a little bit darker. Let's see how I feel about that. Some of this stuff, it's so hard to tell, and it's easier if you take a picture. I have to do that especially with non-metallic metal because it looks weird in person, and then you look at it in a picture and you're like, oh. Which, granted, this is not being painted for display, so it needs to look good in person too. Alright, I'm going to add a little bit of purple in here. Alright, so I added the purple, and I'm just kind of wet blending it in with the teal. Which the edges will look pretty harsh on that while it's wet, but it should dry fine. Alright, now coming back to this guy. Just taking a very thin layer of the teal. It's stronger than a glaze. Just because if I try and glaze it, I will be here all frickin' day. Yeah, I've got to lighten that back up. But for now, I'm just kind of tinting everything because I'm going to come back with some lighter teal and stipple it to bring it back up. Because if I glaze it with a lighter color, it's just going to obliterate all my texture here. Alright, I'm going to mix a lighter teal. Might mix some of the yellow in. Yeah, we'll see how this... Not sure which direction I want to go with it. This is where I just start throwing paint on and seeing what happens. Alright, I mixed the lighter teal. Just kind of working that in. Yeah, I'm gonna need to... I also mixed it with my... There we go. With my yellow and teal mix here. Which this is fine. All this does is just add more texture. And then I'm gonna stipple a little bit of purple in. Very little because it's very dark. There we go. Too much. There we go. So yeah, you can kind of see how that comes together. It's just a lot of back and forth. And you can see like how this is the same colors, but because this is so broken up, it just looks really different. And it's going to behave, the light's going to behave totally different on it because it's cloth. And that's, a lot of color is just light and the quality of light that's hitting it. Alright, I'm going to glaze again. That dry. I'll do these steps in the meantime. Which I'm just going to do flat brush and a little bit more directional painting. A little streaky and a little broken up. Because even though this is metal, like this part, like I'm sure it's like scuffed and scratched to hell, so. Now work some of the purple in on the back. And that's actually pretty good for that piece. I'll do some yellow around the edge. I know for edge highlighting, some people like it really thin paint, really watery. I've had the best luck with drier paint. But it really just depends on the color and the brand. And just playing around with it. Alright. I'm gonna work some just yellow into this now. And then you can see, like, this is the same brush, same size marks as before, but because I'm building up so much on this existing stippling, it starts to blend in. Be a little bit pickier about where the light hits. Like, I'm not going to go all the way down. Actually, Yeah, I'm gonna build up. Try and build up a teeny tiny bit of purple. This purple is killing me. It's so dark. And yeah, that's just gonna need some glazing, but that's pretty close color-wise to where I want it. Alright, and I definitely need a stretch break. That's probably gonna be it for today. Got so much more to do on this guy. But yeah, I'm gonna try and stream, I think, shorter streams, like try and do like 2 hours daily, yeah. Which, hour and a half, but I started a lot later than I wanted to. But yeah, this is kind of where this guy's ending up. Still got a long way to go. Probably still be painting him tomorrow. I'm hoping that I can finish this one today too. It would be nice to finish her this week, and then I'm gonna start. I'll have to dig through my Kingdom Death pile and pick another one to start, which I'll have to find something stream friendly. This is kind of right on the edge here, but what are you gonna do? But yeah, thank you for watching. I appreciate it.